with the giant whoosh of a dragon and the fiery words that is Dracarys, HBO's 8-season epic Game of Thrones came to a disappointing end. People are pretty bummed out about it. Let's be real, guys. Game of Thrones came in like a mighty dragon and took over our lives for 8 years. For years, we dedicated ourselves, these actors, this crew, the cast. They dedicated themselves to this project, to these characters, this world. People immersed themselves in it. And at the end of the day, what did we learn? Were we satisfied? Well, the majority says no, people weren't satisfied. Some people thought they spent 8 years for nothing. All to see, spoiler alert, ladies and gentlemen, a character that nobody was talking about take the Iron Throne. Bran the Brave, or whatever, I don't know his last word. Bran something becomes the ruler of the kingdoms, 7 kingdoms, however many kingdoms there are now. It's all kind of gray and fuzzy, isn't it? Yes, everyone thought the writing was rushed in the final season. Nobody liked the last season. Everybody has problems. But at the end of the day, showrunners do their best to somehow maintain, a level of fan commitment and just make a show overly enjoyable for the fans, while also delivering upon the original promise of what the show is made for, who it's made for, and why it exists. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the showrunners tried to do just that. What we ended up with, well, that's a different story. You look at something like The Walking Dead, for example. Does that have an end game? Who knows? Probably not. And it's so sad because every episode they're losing, thousands upon thousands of viewers, and no show wants to become like that. So I think it was really brave of Game of Thrones to do that before they became the next Walking Dead, which had been at the time the number one show. And then Game of Thrones came in and took that spot. In the classic words of Cersei Lannister, when you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die. There is no middle ground. So with that being said, all of these streaming services, Apple, Netflix, Showtime, HBO, Disney Plus, and Amazon, will be going head-to-head in an epic battle to determine who will win in the Game of Thrones. There really is only winning or dying, because not all of these shows will survive the war. It's true. They just can't. For as big budget as all of these projects I'm about to tell you about are going to be, there is no way that all of them can possibly succeed. Because, just like there can only be one victor on the Iron Throne, there can only be one victor in the medieval streaming world. How many freaking medieval shows can you have? Well, if you talk to these freaking 6 platforms, there are 12. Is that possible? Can you possibly have that many medieval shows on TV at one time? Well, we're going to find out. Over the next several years, these platforms are about to launch some of the biggest, most immersive worlds ever brought to your streaming platforms. Bigger than Game of Thrones, bolder, more expensive, more opportunities for world building. How is this possible, you say? Well, I'm going to hit you with the big one right out the gate. Apple, of course, is releasing their streaming platform later this fall. Of course, this will not be ready by this fall, but it is something they're actively working on. It is a novel series by Isaac Asimov called Foundation. It is the Foundation series, which is probably the closest thing to Star Wars that you can get. It is about a future galactic empire and the civilizations that exist in that empire, bringing it out of destruction and rising it to the top, or something like that. When I was reading about what this was about, it really seriously sounded like Star Wars or Star Trek, and Apple's making it. So that sounds very interesting. It sounds like it could be very flashy and fun and bold. What I worry about it, Apple has already gone on record saying that they're not going to make dark content. I'm not saying this, whatever this is, should be dark or would be dark, but with something so bold as a galactic future in space, one would think you might want to go a little Game of Thrones route. But I don't know if Apple's actually willing to break that mold. The projects that they're all working on right now are all kind of PG-13 and less. Probably even less than PG-13 territory. So I'm really, out of all the streaming platforms in this game, if I had to pick, guys, a loser, I'm going to say it potentially could be Apple. I really just, there's nobody's going to pay for all of these services. I mean, only the true fans will, which a lot of people will. I probably will. I will want to check out Apple when it launches this fall because they're going to have a shit ton of content made by some of the greatest filmmakers out there. Oprah, Steven Spielberg, J.J. Abrams. I can't even it's amazing. Octavia Spencer. The amount of people that are making content on Apple is ridiculous. But at the same time, I'm also the least interested in the content that they are pumping out. Why? Maybe it's because it's just not adult enough. But we'll find that out soon. The big, crazy monolith that it is, Netflix, which we always talk about, is working on not 1, not 2, not 3, not even 4, but 5 medieval series live action. What? I mean, we knew Netflix was crazy, and we know that they're about to lose half their content to Disney at the end of the year. But they really are banking on one of these series becoming the next Game of Thrones. So, up first, will it be The Witcher, which of course is what you think it is, a live-action retelling of the classic novel and video game series, about the continent in war with monster hunters and sorcerers and beasts, all operating, they're not really operating or coexisting. They're in a giant battle. They're fighting. And it sounds pretty epic. I mean, there's some images that have been released of Henry Cavill, who's the lead. He plays Geralt. He is the titular. I don't know if he's the Witcher. But he is the the main character, the monster hunter, with he's got long silver hair. It's like if Superman freaking grew out his hair and got really old, but didn't show it in his face. That's what he would look like. But he's the lead in The Witcher, and Netflix plans on dropping that later this year. That has already actually been shot, so you can expect that coming out very soon. And then, of course, the big reveal that came a couple months ago was that Netflix is working on a live-action retelling reboot of Avatar: The Last Airbender, which is not exactly medieval, but it is a big, epic fantasy world, ripe for storytelling potential, and people are going to bank on that. Like, they're literally remaking every season of Avatar, but just live action. Big budget, culturally, the showrunners have said they want to ensure that it's culturally ethnic cast, properly cast. The composer who composed the entire series is coming back to do the music. They have hired some top-notch, award-winning visual effects artists to ensure that this world is brought to life effectively. And I really do think, I'm going to say this, it is that type of property that already has a fan base built in that could pull in more fans. I think Avatar could become potentially the next Game of Thrones. It really could, guys. It has that nostalgic factor behind it that, if done right, it could also be a giant disaster like Shyamalan's movie, but I don't think so. I think they're going to take what didn't work in that film and put their own unique spin on it, to really make, something that everyone loves. Because everyone loves Avatar, and if you don't, then you're going to. I really feel that. Also, on the table for Netflix, not just a series, but films as well, because Disney, not anymore, it's not Disney, the owners of the C.S. Lewis estate have said that the Narnia world has over 3,000 characters, so the potential for many series and many films is ripe. So, Netflix now owns The Chronicles of Narnia and is actively working on properties with Mark Gordon and his production companies to create series and films in the Narnia universe. Now, I was always a Narnia fan. We got 3 films. They got progressively worse. True. There was 2 constant in all of those, which was Liam Neeson as Aslan and Tilda Swinton as the White Witch. Oh, and I suppose Lucy and Edmund were in all 3 as well. Well, we don't talk about them, do we? No, Narnia just slowly fizzled out. So nobody is really sure where they're going to pick up in this new universe. Honestly, I think they should just reboot the whole thing. Do all the books. If they want to have spin-offs, sure. Do I think Narnia is going to become the next Game of Thrones? No. It could, potentially, but it's not going to. Because I will get to what I think is going to be the next Game of Thrones here soon. Is it going to be the Magic Order? No. A new show that Netflix just picked up, which was actually a new comic series that Mark Miller made. Mark Miller's huge in the comic world. And the Magic Order is about a group of modern-day people who find out that they are magicians and wizards and warlocks meant to save the world. And Netflix has picked it up for a live-action adaptation, which they are quickly fast-tracking to ensure speedy release for your enjoyment. So that sounds exciting, but definitely not the next Game of Thrones. And then, of course, there's the Grishaverse. For those that don't know what the Grishaverse is, I, myself, have actually recently stumbled upon it. I think it is enjoyable, and more than anything, I am most excited by the team that they are forming behind this project. So the book series is a 3-book series that starts with Shadow and Bone, written by Leigh Bardugo. It's about a magical order of people that live in this fantasy era, 1800s, in this Amsterdam-inspired, gritty, terrible city where there's magical beings running around with these powers, the Grisha. But it's a society where there's terrible people, thieves and beggars and people trying to steal valued goods. But amongst that all, there are these people with these magical abilities. And they're kind of making the world run for better or for worse. So that they're combining that 3-book series and a spin-off series, 6 of Crows, which I recently have gotten myself into for entertainment and I guess research purposes. Quite an interesting little idea. What's really weird about this Grishaverse is that Netflix has decided to kind of combine them, which is very weird because they're 2 different series and they're bringing them into one universe. I mean, they are the same universe, but instead of... To me, it feels like they don't believe in the project, that they believe it could have a potential season 2. Because why unite 2 different book series, even though you are the same universe? Why unite 2 book series for 1 season if you didn't believe in the potential of it? So for that right there, I'm going to say this is not going to be the next big thing. Although, the team behind it, like I said, Leigh Bardugo is one of the New York Times best-selling authors right now. Definitely in the United States, if not the world. She's written so many books, especially these books, which are huge. But Eric Hessier, who wrote Arrival, an Oscar-winning, if not Oscar-winning, then Oscar-nominated writer, is the showrunner of the series. And even more interesting is that Sean Levy, who is the head producer on the Stranger Things series, is behind this new series as well. So anything that Sean Levy does is actually really good. He did all the Night at the Museum movies. Everything he touches does really well. So this series probably really will do well. But at the end of the day, it's still not going to be the next big thing. And I think that's really because they don't believe. It just sounds like they don't believe in their property. Why do it all at once if you didn't believe in it? I don't know. Who's to say? We'll find out. Moving away from Netflix for a sec, let's get into Showtime. Man, Showtime, I feel like this doesn't get any love these days. Does anybody, Showtime still exists? People still watch shit on Showtime? I don't know. But they're working on a couple of concepts that they hope is going to be the next big thing. Kingkiller Chronicles, about an adventurer and a musician named Coveted. And he travels his land and does shit. I don't know. It sounds like a good time based on a book series. Next big thing? I don't know. How about that Halo series? Yes, guys, it is finally coming together. The series that Steven Spielberg has been trying to produce for the last 20 years or something, since Halo was created. They were trying to make this a freaking series. Finally, they're finally pulling their shit together. I mean, they have cast Master Chief, Pablo Schreiber from Orange is the New Black, which is really funny, actually, because Pablo Schreiber played Pornstache, and it was a very comedic role, and he's going to play Master Chief. He can do it. He can do it. What are we worried about? Additionally, Stephen Kane from TNT's The Last Ship, and Kyle Killen. Yeah. They're going to showrun. I don't know who he is, but he sounds interesting. Directing the first couple episodes is Otto Bathurst, famously known for last year's horribly not well done film, Robin Hood. Should we be concerned for this new Halo? With that team assembled, maybe. But, we got to stay positive in these things. We got to hope for the best. Let's stay positive, right? Let's stay positive. Moving on to Disney Plus. We had a podcast a couple weeks ago where we talked about all of the new shows that Disney is creating for their streaming service, which comes out on November 16th. Their big show that they hope is going to become the next Game of Thrones is their Star Wars spin-off series, The Mandalorian, starring Pedro Pascal. Now, this series is costing $10 million an episode, with 10 episodes in the first season. Is it going to be big? You bet your bottom dollar it is. Are you kidding me? A dark Star Wars with gunslingers? The bounty hunter side of Star Wars. The part that fans actually, for some reason, care about so much. Literally, fans have Mandalorian tattoos on them everywhere. I mean, this image of the Mandalorian, it's like a freaking alien with tusks, right? This image is something that people in the military wear into battle. It's something that people have tattooed on them for years. This series hasn't come out yet. It was just launched last year with Jon Favreau attached. And yet, it's already something that is so huge and has been so huge for many years. So it already has a built-in fan base, another nostalgic thing. I mean, this is Star Wars property. So is it going to be that next big thing? You bet your bottom ass it is. Is it going to be the next Game of Thrones? No. I don't think Disney has the power. I think they really lost a lot of Star Wars fans with The Last Jedi. And I think it's going to be really hard to earn back a lot of the trust of those fans for their final chapter, The Rise of Skywalker, this December. So even harder if The Mandalorian is not good. Imagine that. I don't think there's a world where Jon Favreau and all these talented directors would make a Star Wars series that wasn't good. And yet, what if for a second? What if it wasn't good? Do you know how many fans they would lose for The Rise of Skywalker a month later? Oh my gosh. That could be a nightmare for them. But they have full faith in The Mandalorian, and they are intent on releasing it on November 16th, a month before Episode 9. HBO has His Dark Materials coming out from the BBC. HBO has picked it up. Of course, it is a retelling of the original movie made in 2007 with Daniel Craig. I mean, it was a failure for many reasons. It just wasn't executed well. I mean, it's a fantasy world where people have demons, their spirits are attached to them in an animal form outside of their bodies, and there's an organization that's trying to separate the human kid from their demon, from their spirit. And there's ice bears, and they battle in the ice in the north. It's a big fantasy series, and I think Game of Thrones, or freaking HBO, wants it to be the next Game of Thrones. I really don't think it's going to be, though. It's just too... For one, it has been known to have atheist themes, and I don't think that's going to transcend well overall with the modern audience. I mean, it's got an interesting cast behind it. Daphne Keane from Logan, James McAvoy, Lin-Manuel Miranda. It's got some interesting people behind it. Overall, though, I think it's going to take too many seasons to build the story that they really want to tell with this thing. And by then, I really don't see this becoming the next big thing on HBO. Now, as for their Game of Thrones prequel, though, the one that HBO is actively working on, that people are dying to see because it is Game of Thrones, so it's got to be good. And it has to be, right? Well, keep in mind now, they have replaced their entire writing staff. all the producers, everybody is new, of course, except for George R.R. Martin, who helped shepherd this new story, with Jane Goldman, who worked on X-Men First Class, the Kingsman movies, the upcoming Little Mermaid. She is heavy in this, working with her team now. A cast has been assembled. Lucy from the Narnia movies is actually one of the leads. Jamie Campbell Brewer from Fantastic Beasts is in this, and Naomi Watts is the lead. And this series, is supposed to take place thousands of years before Game of Thrones. And in the Age of Heroes, so we're supposed to see the origin of the White Walkers and the Starks. And George R.R. Martin is referring to the series as The Long Night. He's been advised not to, but, he's an old man. He can do whatever he wants. So The Long Night, that goes back to, what are we going to see? We're going to see the creation of the Night King. The White Walkers doing shit. I don't know. Who knows what we're going to see? Right now, all of this has been picked up as a pilot. So if the pilot doesn't do well, we're not going to see the rest of the show. There is no way in hell that's not going to happen, though. I mean, what's the chance that a Game of Thrones pilot is not going to be good? Pretty unlikely, but at the same time, keep in mind, different team working on it. It could be a completely different animal. But, of course, we got high hopes for that one. Will Game of Thrones become the next Game of Thrones? No. I don't think so, guys. So what will be? If not Game of Thrones becoming the next Game of Thrones, then what could possibly take it down? How about Amazon's The Dark Tower? Yes, that terrible movie made with Matthew McConaughey and Idris Elba that made no money at the box office. They are turning that, the classic Stephen King novel, into a TV series. Now, some people thought, well, Matthew McConaughey is going to come back, or Idris Elba is going to come back to play the gunslinger because he was so good. But no. Sam Strike from a sci-fi show, and Jasper Paquin, the bad guy from BlacKkKlansman, are going to be the leads. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean it's not going to be good, but I do not think that The Dark Tower is set to be the next Game of Thrones. No. What has the most potential to be the biggest hit and also the biggest failure of all time, all in the same moment, is Amazon's $500 million Lord of the Rings prequel series. Yes, Amazon paid $250 million for the rights, just for the rights, to the series, and it is costing them upwards of $250 to $300 million just for the first season alone. So just for this first season, guys, this is, $500 to $600 million. Is it going to pay off at the end of the day? Well, it is Amazon. But what is this new Lord of the Rings really? I mean, is Peter Jackson involved? No, he's not. Is this the same story? No, it's not. It is actually going to take place 3,441 years, to be exact, before Fellowship of the Ring. Some people thought it was going to be about a young Aragorn, but with almost 4,000 years, there's no way. So instead, it's going to be at the second age of man, about the downfall of them, about the people that Aragorn goes to lead, those men, the downfall of men, and how Sauron takes over. So, will we see Sauron as a character? Yes. Galadriel? Probably. Gandalf? Probably, actually, yes. In fact, Ian McKellen has expressed interest in returning to his classic role, because to him, as he stated, who else could play Gandalf but me? And it is true. Now, J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay, who have worked on Star Trek films, are the showrunners on this series. They're big blockbuster-type directors. What's really interesting, too, this week is that Brian Cogman, who has written and directed some Game of Thrones episodes, has actually come on board this series as a supervisor, producer or something. Interesting, right? Brian Cogman from Game of Thrones is coming on board Lord of the Rings because of his, it feels like I don't know. Maybe he was just like, I can't get enough. Or maybe it's just like, they burned me and they don't want me around anymore. So now I got to go find another medieval show to work on and make good. Whatever the case, obviously Amazon believes in the power of a man like Brian to help shepherd their show to become the next big thing. Obviously, with the hefty price tag on on Lord of the Rings, they anticipate it being a huge property. I mean, Again, this is another one of those things that has nostalgia and fan base already built in. But with it coming to a small screen, I mean, with freaking Lord of the Rings coming to your streaming platform, that's like a surefire sign that you're never going to see it in theaters again. But it's the way of the future, right? So Amazon is heavily banking on you opening up Amazon Prime, logging in, and watching Lord of the Rings, $10 million, $20 million an episode from your laptop or smartphone. It feels... I don't know. Lord of the Rings always felt like the most epic of things, and then Game of Thrones became the most epic of things. And I think it's going to take Amazon a while to build Lord of the Rings to be the next epic of things. So really, where are we at here? I don't know. But I'm going to go ahead and say this for you guys. Out of all of these shows, which are going to be the cream of the crop, which are going to rise to claim the Game of Thrones? Well, I really do think The Mandalorian is going to be up there. I also think that Amazon's Lord of the Rings will be up there. But surprisingly, if I was putting money on the table, if I was a betting man, which I definitely am not because I suck at that. But if I was a betting man, I would say that Avatar The Last Airbender is actually going to be highly successful with the team they are building and with the built-in fan base. I really do think that Netflix is going to have a hit on their hands with Avatar. With that being said, we are years away from some of these projects taking place, and in that time, who knows how many more projects these companies will grow and create to try and become, something big. Something people want to nibble on. Something for their eyes. A visual feast. So at the end of the day, what will we be entertained by? Anything? Or are we going to be hitting Game of Thrones fatigue and we just don't want any of it? I choose not to believe that. Let's just hope we get some good showrunners and writers in there to create quality entertainment for our lives to be entertained by. So until then, there's only one thing that can be said for all of these streaming services. Remember, when you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die. There is no middle ground. So, may the odds be ever in your favor. Good luck to all. Thank you guys for listening to today's podcast. Stay tuned next week as we will be talking about another exciting movie in the summer movie season. Hope you guys have a very exciting week. Go watch some films because there are so many good films out there to see. Just enjoy, live life, and we'll see you next week.